This is my third lecture on forest. After this lecture, you will be able to understand the characteristics of forest, such as domination of trees, forest canopy, biodiversity, forest floor, variation in soil fertility, complex ecosystems, lumbering, preparation, felling, extraction, replanting, about something silviculture, factors affecting lumbering, etc. During previous lecture, we could understand that forests are of great importance and there are variety of forests that are found around the world. In this lecture, we are going to understand the characteristic of forest along with the industry that has grown up largely due to higher consumption of forest products and luxurious lifestyle. Let us discuss about general characteristics of forest. The first and foremost, whenever we think about forest, the first unit comes in our mind are trees. Forests are mostly dominated by large plants like trees. Some trees, especially in rainforest, gain a lot of height to get more sunlight. Most of other plants face tough competition from large plants, as these tend to receive most of the nutrition from environment. Some plants have evolved to become creeper and climbers to combat this competition. They climb over trees to reach the sunlight as well. Now you might have heard about forest canopy. What is forest canopy? Forest canopy refers to the cover of tall forest. This top portion of a community of trees or plant crowns serve as interface between the atmosphere and the land. The canopy is also the upper habitat for other biological organisms in a forest ecosystem. The structure of forest canopy differs from forest to forest because of the availability of nutrients, trees arrangement, and differences in biological species. The forest canopy is an ecosystem in itself, as it supports a variety of life which is not found in forest itself. As I explained earlier also, that forests reflect great biodiversity. Yes, great biodiversity is another component. Forests are one of the major habitats which support a great biodiversity of life than another habitat. This is attributed to easy availability of food and shelter. Scientists estimate that more than half of the world's plant and animal species live in tropical rainforest. A part of this diversity are the local tribal people who depend on the forest for almost all their needs. Now, what is forest floor? The forest floor is composed of fallen leaves, stems, twigs, branches, and bark on the surface of the soil. A forest floor also contains organic and inorganic substances. The forest floor is inhabited by various living organisms such as the fungi, bacteria, and other microorganisms, as it is rich in nutrients and mineral content. The forest floor has a significant role in the transfer of nutrients in the life cycle of the forest ecosystem. Another factor is variation in soil fertility. The soil of temperate forest is fertile because trees' leaves drop to ground every day. This little contribute to the layers of organic material found in forest soil. The old leaves become a source of food for bacteria and fungi. These organisms facilitate the breaking down of the leaves and other organic material, which is also called as decomposition. So, decomposition enriches the forest soil as it provides more nutrient to the living trees and plant in the forest ecosystem. Another factor is complex ecosystem. Forests are among the most complex ecosystems in the world. Conifer forests have the simplest structure. a tree layer rising to about 98 feet, or in other words I can say 30 meter, a shrub layer that is spotty or even absent, and a ground layer covered with lichens, mosses and liverworts. Compared to that, deciduous forests are more complex. The tree's canopy is divided into an upper and lower story, while rainforest canopies are divided into at least 3 strata. Some species of fungi lives in partnership with the tree's roots, while others are parasitically destructive in nature. Though we all know that forests have great ecological importance, human has always used different forest products for his use. With the advancement of technology and luxurious lifestyle, forests are being cut on a large scale around the world. So let us discuss a little bit about lumbering. Lumbering is defined as cutting down trees and turning them into pieces of wood used for building. An example of this is using a chainsaw to cut down trees, which will eventually be made into 2 into 4 pieces. In other words, the procedure of systematic cutting and felling of trees for the utilization of timber and extraction of other forest produce for commercial grain is known as lumbering. The extraction of timber from natural forest is organized in several stages, which may be described in different phases. The first stage to survey the area to be exploited. It is important to find out where the best stands of timber are or where the most valuable trees are most numerous, so that the best parts of the forest can be used. It would be uneconomic to open up a forest area where there were few valuable trees. The requirements for transport must also be taken into consideration and possible routes for extraction planned. So the next stage is to open up the forest by cutting tracks and roads which will give them lumberman access to the trees and also allows the log to be removed. If the area to be exploited is distant from the center of population, as is often the case in the tropical forest and in parts of Canada and USSR, a camp will also have to be established within living quarters for the men, facilities for servicing and maintaining equipment, and stores of wood and fuel supply. Now next explanation is felling. What do you mean by felling? Once all the appropriate preparations made, felling can begin. The trees may be felled with axes or hand saws, but almost everywhere today power saws are used for speed and ease of felling. So the tree must be cut in such a way that when they fall, they do not fall in the wrong direction. Very important. Crushing nearby trees or falling awkwardly so that they are difficult to move. The branches are stripped and trunks sawn into suitable lengths as logs. Here comes the third stage, that is known as extraction. The logs are moved to collection points on the network of access roads and then taken by tractors to riverside for floating downstream or loaded onto railway trucks, lorries or sledge trains for the transport to the mills or exporting ports. There are different methods of extraction, such as one is Part-3 method. In Britain or in British Columbia and the Pacific Northwest of USA, the forest clothe the steep slopes of the Rockies, the Cascades and the Pacific Coast ranges, and under these conditions transport of the logs is rather difficult. The traditional method of extraction is therefore to clear an area with the exception of a tall spar tree. The tree is topped to a height of about 60 meters and secured by stabilized by guy ropes. Nowadays, This tree is usually placed by a steel tower which is used in the same way. It is fitted and pulley apparatus by which the individual logs are lifted and swung down the valley side. The second method in this connection is known as sliding and floating method. In most of the coniferous forest in eastern Canada and USSR, lumbering follows a seasonal pattern. This is because of a great variation in weather condition between summer and winter. In winter, the ground is frozen and the snow covered and the streams frozen. In the summer, the ground thaws out and is often very muddy and waterlogged. Thus, the trees are felled in winter and early spring when they can be dragged or skidded fairly easily over the slippery ground. They may be dragged by tractors individually, but often they are loaded onto sledges or sledge train for transport to the riverside or sledge trains for transport to the riverside. Another method is known as traditional teak extraction. The teak forests are mostly in monsoonal area in Burma and Thailand, and thus, as in most of the coniferous forests, there is a seasonal rhythm to the work. In the dry season, the trees which have already been ring barked for several years are felled and are dragged with the help of elephants to the nearest streams. In dry season, the rivers are low and the logs are simply laid in the channel to await the rains. When the rivers swell and the logs begin to float downstream, jams are cleared with the help of elephants. When the logs reach the larger rivers, they are collected into rafts and these float slowly down the major rivers, such as the Irrawaddy to the swam mills and the sea. So the rafts take some time to complete their journey and the men who guide them live on the rafts, erecting small huts on the logs which are roughly bound together. Mechanized lumbering in the tropics. What happens? The traditional method of extraction using axes, elephants and hand labor are no longer used in the areas in the tropics. Nowadays, modern equipment such as tractors, power saws and so is employed in this connection. Because the climate is not markedly seasonal, operations go on all the year round. The logs are dragged to collection points over path of small logs to overcome the muddy or wet condition experienced after rain. From the collection points, logs are dragged by tractors to main camp where they are loaded to a large lorries or light railways or are taken to river where they can be floated. If the logs are to be floated, the heaviest logs which would not otherwise float are fixed between two more buoyant logs. They are collected into rafts in same way as in other areas. Where rivers are not suitable for floating or where the forests are fairly easily accessible from roads and railways, conventional means of transport may be more widely used, such as in Malaysia. Now, another method is replanting. When the timber has been extracted, the timber company is usually legally bound to ensure that forest regeneration can take place. This is very important. This usually means that new seedlings have to be planted, placed to fell trees. Though if only a few trees are extracted, as in many tropical areas, it is sufficient to make sure in felling that there are sufficient saplings of the same species as the felled trees so that the species is not wiped out. Trees of the same species as those felled may be replanted, but often trees are replaced by quicker growing or more valuable species. The extraction of timber from planted forest is usually much simpler than extraction from virgin forest, because the trees have been planted occasionally, thinned and generally cared for by foresters or farmers, they are usually of a similar age, of a similar quality, and of a single species. This means that when the trees mature, they can all be cut by clear method. Transport is easier, partly because clear cutting can be practiced, and partly in planted forest there is always a network of roads and tracks which also foresters to reach all parts of the forest for regular inspections, thinning or sapling or spraying with insecticides. Ground conditions are often been then in natural forest because waterlogged areas usually drained with the dual purpose of easing the transport and promoting trees growth. Moreover, nurseries are constantly in use. Raising tree for replanting acts thus reforestation is of natural part of the forest work and not an enforced measure which companies grudgingly undertake. Now you may think, what are the factors that affect lumbering? Let me explain you. The very different nature of the forest in different climatic zones means that the technique of extraction, the economics of exploitation, and the degree of mechanization vary greatly. The underdeveloped economies of many tropical countries also mean that while many forest areas, both hardwoods and softwoods in the temperate areas, are subject to constant exploitation, many of the vast forests of the tropical areas are little used. Coniferous forests form only about a third of the world forest total forest area, but they account for almost half the total wood and 2/3 of the industrial wood output. Not only are the temperate forests used more, they are used more intensively and yield many species. Whereas in tropical forest, only species highly valued timbers are usually extracted. Temperate forests, because of their greater use, are however better supervised to prevent overcutting and to ensure that trees are replaced by new seedlings. So in this lecture, we have studied about the general characteristic of forest. These general characteristics help us to know about the forest in detail. It makes us understand that forests are not just a group of trees. We could also understand the process of lumbering and its type. Lumbering is not conducted homogeneously around the world. Rather, there are multiple factors that affect the lumbering and related processes. In the next lecture, we shall read about these factors in detail along with the problems for food industry.